Hello there. Um, my name is, make sure I'm still here. Yeah, okay, hi. All right, so I can share my screen now. Let's do that. I can go straight to this. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see my lovely presentation. Welcome to Carleton's Virtual Open House, and welcome to the environmental engineering session. My name is Professor Thomas Walker. I'm an assistant professor in environmental engineering. I've been here since 2018. Before that, I was a postdoctoral fellow at NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab in California. Before that, I got a PhD in physics at University of Toronto. So I've been all over the world, or North America anyway. And I'm here today to tell you a little bit about environmental engineering at Carleton. Obviously, if there are any questions, I believe they go into the Q&A tab on the right of the presentation. So if you have questions, then there are recruitment staff available to answer them, and I will leave time at the end to interact with you and take any questions. So let's dive right in and ask ourselves, well, what is environmental engineering? Why might you want to study it? Why might you want to study it at Carleton? And in broadly speaking, when you think about engineering, the main thing that engineers do is that engineers solve problems. So people come to an engineer when they have a technical challenge that they're trying to overcome, whether it's something small, like making a device fit inside of another device, or whether it's something big like removing a contaminant from a particular river. Now, the environment's a very complex system. So when we're talking about environmental engineering, we're really talking about solving these complex problems. And therefore, when you're studying to be an environmental engineer, we look at systems from a lot of different perspectives. So you'll get a very broad base of understanding. So my colleagues in the civil department, when they give this kind of talk, it's actually quite easy to point to the really big structures and bridges and things that civil engineers have. I think that's working. That civil engineers produce. So things like dams or skyscrapers or train tracks, all of those big pieces of infrastructure, and it's very in your face and easy to see. But sometimes the most successful bits of environmental engineering are a little like they're a little like jazz music. So when you're listening to jazz, the trumpet player's playing all of the notes, but then suddenly in the middle of the music, there's this quiet, this rest, a little bit of silence, and it's that beautiful bit of silence that you don't hear where you're not hearing a sound. That is the real skill of that musician. In the same way, a successful environmental engineering can look like no engineering at all. So for instance, this bottom left picture is showing what is actually a landfill, but you wouldn't know it. It looks a little bit more like a park or just a natural shoreside. But this is in fact a highly engineered landfill that was constructed to, at the end of its life, to look like a park and to be used as such. So this is someplace in New Jersey, I think, and it is used as parkland, and wildlife lives there, and it's actually a very good example of low impact engineering. Other things that environmental engineers are involved with that you might not even think about are things like being able to turn on your tap and have clean drinking water come out of it. This is obviously a privilege for us to have here in Canada. Not everywhere shares that privilege. Not everywhere in Canada shares that privilege. But every time you turn on your tap, behind that clean water somewhere is standing an environmental engineer making sure that that happens. lastly, I have the picture of the glacier on the right to indicate that the existence of glaciers in the face of a warming climate is really a testament to ongoing efforts to combat climate change that are engaged in by environmental engineers across the world, and the successful implementation of those efforts continuing over the next few decades depends on bringing in environmental engineering students who are going to use their ingenuity and their passion for the environment to help to overcome this generational sized challenge.
Professor Walker, sorry.
Yes, of
to cut
course.
you
Yeah.
off. Your share screen is actually showing as black, so I don't think anyone can see it at the moment.
Oh, weird. Ah, gross. Okay. I'll try it again and just let me. How is that?
There we go. Perfect.
That's still black? Okay,
No,
so here's what I was talking about the last slide, where we have the successful civil engineering up top. Apologies for that. Thank you for pointing that out, Christine. So we have these grand structures that are built by civil engineers, and that's wonderful, and we love them for it. But the successful environmental engineering can be a little more subtle, but nonetheless very impactful. So at the end of the day, if we want to have a healthy and resilient cityscape to live in, so this is an image of beautiful downtown Ottawa. You can see the Parliament buildings in the background, Chateau Laurier on the right, and even the Rideau Canal at the bottom, and some transit going over a bridge. But if we want all of those things and have someplace healthy and wonderful to live in, you need all of the things, the services that are provided by environmental engineers. So things like the clean drinking water, like wastewater treatment, waste treatment in general, sanitation, and solid waste disposal, and then clean air. We don't have a particularly great picture for clean air, except maybe the picture above where you see this nice bright blue sky instead of a smoky haze over the city. And all of these things, so these kind of 4 images at the bottom give a bit of a categorization into different subdisciplines within environmental engineering. And I wanted to point out at this point that our program does include material from each of those little subdisciplines, as well as some other more broadly applied courses. But we'll get to that. So why should we study environmental engineering? As I said before, the environmental engineering done really well can look like nothing at all, but a lack of good environmental engineering can look very, very bad. So the cases that might come to mind are cases where people have been injured or even died. It could be things like water treatment problems. It's caused a number of highly publicized events where people were either evacuated or became ill. And so in 2001, North Battleford, 7,000 people were hospitalized with cryptosporidium, which is a bacterium that you could learn about. In Walkerton, the same year, another 2,000 ill, even some fatalities in that case. This was a different bacteria, but both were the result of a lack or a mishandling of the water treatment. On the air pollution side, air pollution is among the leading causes of death in the world. It causes millions of premature deaths and just a huge environmental cost in terms of things like lost days working or hospitalizations. And we think of it kind of as a not here problem, but it is still within Canada one of the leading causes of death. It's about 5% of the premature deaths in Canada per year, according to Health Canada. So studying this problem, working to correct it or to help to mitigate some of those sources is definitely worthwhile. We also have a huge plastic waste problem. This was highly in the news for much of the last few years. In Canada, we generate a lot of plastic waste. It comes from packaging, it comes from products that we use. And even though plastic can be recycled, not a lot of it does get recycled. So overall, about just over 10% goes to recycling plants. And the problem with plastic is that it persists a long time. So if you don't burn it, which causes an air pollution problem, or put it in a landfill, which has its own issues with regards to drinking water or land use, that plastic eventually ends up in the oceans. And this has been demonstrated again and again. You might have heard of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which is an accumulation of plastics that have kind of stuck together in the middle of the ocean. But they also wash up on beaches across lakes and oceans worldwide. So that's yet another problem that environmental engineering is attempting to put a dent into. And my last little pitch for motivating you to study environmental engineering is climate change, which is a big, big, big issue. The image that you're seeing on the right here is actually a glacier. And this is from last summer. So not this summer, but it's up in the Northwest Passage. And what you're seeing is the calving of a glacier. So this kind of light white line, this outline, is part of Ellesmere Island. And there's a little inlet here that's covered in a glacier. And this part that's breaking off on the top left is actually about the size of Manhattan Island. So it's a huge chunk of ice. And it represents about 40% of this ice shelf. And that is a direct consequence of warming in the Arctic. We know already that global temperatures are rising. This is something that is currently happening. We're poised for another 1.5 degrees of warming worldwide. And because of the position of Canada close to the North Pole, we expect that temperatures in Canada are already rising faster than the global average, and particularly in the north. So the impact in northern communities and in the Northwest Passage particularly is going to be just phenomenally large on their life. So there are numerous efforts and ways that environmental engineering contributes to solutions to the problem of climate change, both in terms of mitigation, which is trying to stave off the worst of the effects, and also on the adaptation side, because there is going to be some amount of warming that happens, and society is going to have to deal with that somehow. And this can come in the form of higher sea levels. It can come in the form of changes in weather patterns. All of these things are they're effects that environmental impact assessment would take into account. So changes to infrastructure need to be considered. So all of these, I'm not trying to scare you, but these are all big, huge, complex problems. And what we need today is the ingenuity and determination and the passion that young people bring into the field to help contribute to those solutions. So this is your generational problem. It's my generational problem. These are things that we can solve, and we can solve them together, but we need people to do it. So I'm going to kind of shift from this philosophical treatise on why should you study environmental engineering and trying to motivate it to what you'll actually learn if you when you come to Carleton into the environmental engineering program. And I already spoke a little bit about the different subdisciplines that you might encounter, things like water treatment, wastewater treatment, solid waste management, air quality, climate change, environmental impact assessment. I think I touched on just about all of these. Carleton has an extraordinarily well-balanced environmental engineering program in that you do get exposed to every single one of these sub areas, which gives you a great broad skill set to work with as you graduate and go into the field. There is also opportunity within the program to start to tailor your degree, and we'll get into that I think on the next slide. But you can kind of focus if a particular subdiscipline is of interest to you. You can start to focus in your upper years on that particular discipline. So this is how I kind of envision our program. It's sort of an inverted triangle or inverted pyramid where you're building the foundation in your first year, and as you go on, it becomes more and more focused. Oh, there we go. So it's a 4-year program. In the first year, you're learning really the basics of the I was going to say the genre, but of the field, of the discipline. And this comes down to the very basic mathematics, physics, chemistry, biology, and computer skills that you will need to proceed in the program. And much of this is a common core now within engineering. So there is, at the first year point, a certain amount of flexibility. If you get into a program and decide, maybe that's not for me, you don't necessarily lose a full year because these basic courses are primarily common to all of the disciplines. There are some differences, I will say. Once you get into your second year, then you're going to focus more on engineering fundamentals. So these are things that you wouldn't necessarily see if you were, say, in the sciences, whereas the first year you might take physics or chemistry in common if you were in a science program. But now you're starting to apply those basic fields of knowledge to engineering problems. So here's where you start to do things like mechanics, look at materials, how those materials change and under certain forces. You look at fluids and heat transfer and how to analyze processes. So you can imagine a fluid moving from one bin to the next, to the next, to the next in say a water treatment plant. You need to know how to calculate the rates of flow, the amount of time it stays in each bin, and what's happening to it as it's moving through those in terms of heat transfer, in terms of mass transfer. So all of those things go into kind of the second year. After the second year, you're focusing even more into environmental type courses, and you start to see courses that are specifically on some of those subdisciplines. So these are still common for everyone who takes them. These are things like water treatment, contaminant transport. Systems modeling is kind of a general, how does pollution move within a medium, either a gaseous medium in terms of air pollution, or a fluid medium, or even for soils and groundwater, you can look at mixed media. So how does it move through a groundwater soil system, for example? And you'd learn how to kind of represent that in a mathematical way. And lastly, in the final year, you get to really specialize your degree. You get a number of electives that you can tailor to your own interests. In addition, you get to focus on a major design project. So this is called your capstone design project, and it's really the gem in the top of your degree. And it's often touted if you go into job interviews after your fourth year, you say, this is what I did for my major design project. So in that design project, you get teamed up with a set of your peers, a small group, and you're working on a real life design problem often in tandem with professional engineers who are working in the field or with the faculty in the environmental engineering department. So it is really a great program all the way through. You can see it does build in this kind of focusing way from year 1 through year 4. While you're going through, we do have the option, a co-op education option. So it has certain prerequisites. You need a certain, to maintain a certain grade point average to be eligible, but co-op is an excellent way to obtain some hands-on experience during your degree. So on the left here, you have a group of students with one of our professors, Scott Bucking on the left there, in front of a Stantec logo. So Stantec is one of the big consulting company in environmental engineering. They're a big international company. And you can get kind of work within those types of environments, or you can end up doing things like field work, looking at pipelines and environmental issues surrounding those. I can't say enough great things about co-op. I neglected to mention off the top, I usually introduce myself. I am a Carleton alum myself. So I did my engineering degree here a few years ago. I actually went through in engineering physics, which was excellent. But I ended up circuitously back teaching environmental engineering, which I also thoroughly love. So while I went through, I did do the co-op program. Co-op is an excellent way to get experience, and it's very often a foot in the door, so that when you graduate, you have contacts within industry who will vouch for you, either in terms of just getting a reference or in terms of actually getting you that job coming out of your degree. And it's co-op is great. It is a program in which you get out what you put into it. So we do have plenty of resources at Carleton that are well connected within the city, within the community, to connect you to professionals. I will say, however, that a lot of the successful co-op stories are where individuals have taken initiative themselves to go out and seek those employers. So I view the co-op resources as facilitation. It really is a question of having your own initiative put behind that as well, though. I wanted to take this chance to promote a few of the projects within the department. So co-op is to kind of go and get jobs outside in industry, but our professors within the Faculty of Engineering are engaged in plenty of research projects, and they span the spectrum of all of the subdisciplines. We have people in every facet of environmental engineering. This is one that is often very exciting for students to see. It's called the Buckets to Rain Barrels project. It's based in Tanzania in Eastern Africa. It's led by Professor Anita Basu, who I think is in the light blue in the back there. But the main focus of the research is to try to bring water treatment and water resources knowledge to the people in these small rural communities in Eastern Africa, where water is really a precious resource. So you can see on the right here, kind of a very simple stack filtration system where, say, rainwater could be poured in the top, and the material in the stack, which is built from things that they have available to them in those communities, would filter out contaminants, and you have drinkable water at the end. So it's a great program. Professor Basu does does do capstone projects with this in mind. There are often undergraduate opportunities with her lab to participate in this kind of initiative. Another project, environmental engineering, but it's so close, it's tantalizing, are things like this, what we call a tiny house. It used to be on campus right next to the engineering building. This is actually the architecture building on the right here, but the engineering building is just to the side. And this is a project to build a fully self-sustaining house. And you can see a number of both graduate and undergraduate students who were involved in the construction, which took place on campus. So this is entirely powered and self-sufficient. I think it's meant to provide housing in Northern Canada. And as far as I know, the Northern Nomad House is still kicking around on campus. I think they've moved it down to the river. But the professor involved there still gives tours and would love to engage with undergraduate students. So in addition to all of the great research in our department, there is a plethora of student activities. I will absolutely not be able to do justice to all of them. What I like to highlight here is that you can and will, at Carleton Engineering, find your own brand of fun and of weird. So if you have an interest that is philosophy or cooking or something completely outside of engineering, there will be people here who share that passion. And it's just a matter of getting in touch, getting connected with them, and forming those bonds, which is something that it's a great part of the engineering student experience, is that you get to have those friendships, and they build through things like these student bodies. So the big one within Carleton Engineering is the Student Engineering Society. Their website is here. I encourage you to go check it out. They still maintain a large number of activities, even though they have been forced online along with everyone else by the pandemic. They've been doing a great job at keeping people engaged and meeting with one another. Oops, my apologies. We also have a number of designing activities. So these are very engineering specific, where so there's a project called the Solar Decathlon, which is using solar power to build things like cars that run on solar power or other small design challenges. There is the Troitsky Bridge building competition, which you can see images of here on the right. This is held annually, and it is building these small bridges and then having them crushed by a big hydraulic press. Some of them are astoundingly strong. And I should toot the horn here that Carleton usually does quite well at these types of engineering competitions. So even internationally, students at Carleton have placed in these competitions year in and year out. Another one that my colleague, Professor Sherwood, who's over giving the civil engineering presentation right now, he runs what's called the Great Northern Concrete Toboggan Race, which just looks like so much tons of fun. It's just what it sounds like. You're building a big old concrete toboggan and racing it down a hill. And it's just a great event and a great way to meet people who have the same kinds of passions as you. I can also promote the winners of the APT, so the Association of, I always forget this acronym, I should write it out. It's a competition using traditional building methods. So this is a concrete or a brick and mortar arch using the kind of mortar that would have existed, say 50 or 100 years ago. And Carleton has won this competition twice. You can see pictures here of the arch as they were testing it. And I know that when they were testing it, they actually ran out of weights within the civil lab to place on top of it. So they had to go find more weights because the arch was so strong. So they won that competition twice in recent years. I also have so much to say about student life at Carleton. There's just a ton of different activities. I encourage you to get engaged with the Student Engineering Society because they will promote things both within and without engineering. So you can get into sports, intramurals, social events. All of it is available to you at Carleton. So at this point, I get to introduce briefly the faculty members who are under the environmental engineering part of the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering. So it's a department that contains many people. These are the folks who teach the environmental program. So we have, they're not particularly well organized according to field. I mentioned Professor Basu. She runs the Tanzania project, but is an expert in water treatment as well. Professor Ormechi is our wastewater treatment expert and is internationally renowned in that field. Professor Paul Van Giel deals with soil remediation and transport of waste and wastewater through soils, so things like landfills and contaminants moving through waterways. We have a couple of newer additions, so Professor Van de Ven and Professor Kim. Professor Van de Ven works with release of greenhouse gases from underneath geological formations, so things like methane being trapped under a shale, for example, and the sensing of that using acoustic technology. Professor Kim focuses on urban resilience, so how to build cities that are able to better withstand changes to their weather or to their hydrological regime. There's myself. I work in air quality and climate change. Professor Shams is an instructor who is also a water treatment expert. There's Professor Hakami, who's also an air pollution modeling individual. And then we have Professor Abid Hussain, who works with waste to energy conversion. So he actually takes things like compost and converts that into electricity. Professor Sims is another soil remediation expert and works a lot with things like mining waste. So if you have a mine that has been active for a long time, not all of the material that comes out of the mine is the metal that you want. So you have to deal with that waste product, and that lives for a long time. So these are the people who will teach the courses in environmental engineering. They're excellent, an excellent group, and you can find more about them at their individual web pages. I'll let you search through those links. If you want to get things done within the department, these are the folks that you really want to get to know. So these are our wonderful administrative staff. Kay Castleman is our undergraduate administrator and would be the go-to person for finding out anything to do with your undergraduate degree. Pyle and Reynosa work in the same office as her, and they are together a wonderful team of individuals, and I've yet to have a question for them. And as a newer faculty member, I have had plenty of questions, but I've yet to stump them in terms of knowing how to get things done in the department. So they're just wonderful to work with. And on the left here, we have our environmental lab tech, who you will get to know very well as you go through the program, as he's in charge of things like safety and working in the environmental labs. So at this point, I've kind of gone through the program and the specifics to engineering, I wanted to leave with kind of a few ideas for what you need to do well during your undergraduate time. And these are tips from someone who has obviously gone through an undergraduate degree and at Carleton, but it's also informed by opinions and advice from many other faculty members and other sources. So I'm not blowing smoke here, is what I'm trying to say. One of the biggest things, no matter what program you end up in, is that it's very tempting as your kind of first taste of freedom and not being mandated to be at school or at class, maybe not having as much parental supervision anymore. It's very tempting to skip classes or to be a little lax about attendance. But really your excitement and engagement in the classes are what make them an excellent place to be. And it is much, much, much more difficult to have success in your degree if you're not participating. Engineering is a great subject in general to try to relate to the things that you see every day. So particularly things like physics or chemistry, you experience a lot of those things all around you, and you just maybe haven't noticed. So things like, what are the forces that hold up the roof that's above you right now? So being able to relate that stuff back to the things you see every day is a great benefit to being in engineering. If you're coming in September, I know the feeling of that, like, first day of school. You're excited, you've got your new pencils, everything is wonderful. Keep that enthusiasm going, because it does get hard a few months in. So you do want to stay on top of all your courses and try to get ahead as much as you can. It's important to view everything here as kind of building on one another. So this is going back to that kind of pyramid structure. So you can kind of work from one year to the next and try to see things fitting together as much as you can. One piece of advice that I would like you to take away here is, if you do plan to drop something, please do study the course progression tree carefully, and better yet, talk to someone who knows that course progression tree. So the course progression tree is which courses depend on having passed the previous courses. So it does happen that you might have to drop a course. It's no fault on the individual. Things do happen, life happens. But just be sure that you know what the consequences are if you do plan to drop that course. Otherwise, it's possible that it sets you back a full year, which is not what we want. One of the best parts of going through an undergraduate degree in engineering, in my opinion, was being able to work with a group of students who are all engaged in the same kinds of problems, because it gives you an opportunity to kind of discuss those problems and to teach or learn from each other. So when I was going through, sometimes talking through or trying to explain a problem to someone else in my my friend group was an even better way to fully understand that problem than kind of repetitively doing it on my own. I find that having to explain it to someone else gives just that little bit of change in perspective, to try to understand it the way that they're understanding it, that it gives you a much fuller comprehension of what's happening. And that kind of group work is so critical to getting the most out of your degree. do get to know your professors. So I introduced the folks who are in the environmental program. We are to an individual very approachable, and we tend to have this kind of symbiotic relationship with our students. So we are a gateway for students to have opportunities doing research or even jobs, while you have something that we need, which is your ability to do this type of engineering work. So if nothing else, you get to know your professors, because at some point in your life, you might need a reference for something. And having a relation, or having a professor who knows you by name, who can give you that reference, is a helpful thing to have. And it's, I don't know if I have to stress this these days, being involved in something extracurricular, so outside of the classroom, especially something that gives you exercise. It's been so important these past couple of years with everyone being inside as much as we have been, to get exercise and stay active. It's good for your physical health. It's excellent for your mental health. All of this is important for you being a healthy and happy person, let alone a student. On the other hand, getting good grades in your undergraduate degree does pay off, but really you want to keep a bit of a balance here. So you want to work hard at the things that are going to matter, but you want to spend your time in a way that you get a balanced, full experience within your degree. So I'm going to skip this tips for success in online learning, because, oh my goodness, by next year, I hope that we don't need to do that. But I will stop sharing. Hello. So I will leave this time. I've got about 10 minutes before I turn into a pumpkin, but it would be, oh, thank you, Jaleel gave me that acronym that I didn't remember. Awesome. So if there are any questions, I am more than happy to answer those now. I do see one on the right here from Angus. I don't know if am I allowed to answer those questions? Ah, perfect. Okay. Hi, Angus. How big are class sizes? So class sizes vary, and they tend to get smaller the later into the degree you go. So the classes that are more specialized and specific to environmental engineering will be a smaller cohort. I believe the enrollment in environmental engineering is between kind of 50 and 70 students. So that's the maximum you would expect in your kind of third and fourth year courses. Some of the courses that you'll take, things like engineering economics or professional practice, are common across all of the disciplines, so those can be a bit bigger. The biggest classes that you'll probably be in are your first year classes. Right now, I teach one of the first year classes. I teach statics and mechanics, and my section, I believe, right now has 240 students in it. So that is the biggest class, I think, that's been being taught within the whole faculty, are those first year classes. And the maximum there is 200 and some. So I hope that answers your question. Megan, thank you. What differentiates environmental engineering from environmental science? Excellent question. So the difference is in the application and in the amount of technical content. So because environmental engineering is an accredited program under the Professional Engineers of Ontario, it means a few things. So it means that when you graduate, you are eligible for that professional designation. So you do need, there's a there is an experience requirement, so you need to be working as an engineer for a certain amount of time before you get your professional designation. But the degree itself does give you that, the educational part of the prerequisite. The other differentiation is the technical content. So the accreditation process with PEO means that you will take a certain amount of mathematics, a certain amount of basic science, as well as a certain amount of design. So that's the main thing, is that engineers participate in the design process much more than people who are in science, where research is a bigger focus. So in terms of kind of career prospects, you're looking at, if you want to be building and creating, designing systems to help the environment, then engineering would be the place to do that. Yeah, so I hope that's successful. Lillian, are classes grouped in cohorts, meaning you would be with the same students in all your engineering classes? That is an excellent question. It is not explicitly the case. So we don't, as far as I'm aware, cohort students specifically, especially all the way through, because there is a certain amount of flexibility within the, there's a certain amount of flexibility within the degree to take electives. Within the first year, the Common Core courses, you do, they're arranged in kind of pairs. So you take, for example, I said I teach statics and dynamics to first year students. So each of those courses is 6 weeks long, and it's primarily the same group of students that I have in the first 6 weeks and the second 6 weeks of the fall term. So in that sense, yes, you are seeing the same group of students for that course, but those students would be mixed in their other first year courses. So you do get to mix and mingle with everyone who's in engineering, which is a group of about 1,000 each year coming in. As you proceed further into the degree, yes, you do tend to see the same people. So the people within your discipline particularly. So if you're in environmental engineering, you would be taking courses that are specific to environmental engineering, things like contaminant transport that only environmental engineers take. There you would be seeing the same set of 50 or 60 people as you get later on in the degree. Oh, all right, Macy. How does Carleton's environmental engineering program compare to Waterloo's environmental engineering program? Excellent question. Am I allowed to bash Waterloo? Is that allowed? No bashing. Okay. I wasn't actually planning to. So Carleton's program, I can say with regards to that, Carleton does have a very nicely balanced environmental engineering program. So we do really stress the comprehensive base that you get. So you get to see all of the aspects related to climate change, air quality, water treatment, wastewater treatment. Other programs across Canada, not just Waterloo in specific, but programs do tend to have a focus on the places where they have strong groups of professors. So if you had a strong group of professors who were in water resources engineering, maybe that subdiscipline might be stressed a little more in the undergraduate program. Carleton, our program works very closely with an advisory board to try to keep that undergraduate program broad, comprehensive, and most of all applicable to what employers want to see in an environmental engineer. So that's one of the big drivers, is what what do people expect from a Carleton environmental engineering grad? And we work very closely with this advisory board that is comprised of employers, essentially, to try to ensure that if they're taking someone out of our program, they know what they're getting, and they're getting a quality student or a quality graduate at that point. So I hope that answers at least a part of your question. I think that Jaleel said we are out of time, and we have 5 minutes before the next session. So thank you all for attending. I know I can't see any of you, but I know there are people here, and I thank you for sitting through my talk. Please feel free to enjoy the rest of your sessions, the rest of your day, and welcome to Carleton.